input to the Arduino board. I'm using Visual Basic version number 2019, as you can see there. And basically what we're going to do is replicate the control of the digital output and the analog input via the controls or the front panel on a Visual Basic type form, using buttons and text boxes and other objects on that form. So as you can see on this display here, to design the actual form, you have the form itself, then have a number of buttons, for example, one to turn the LED on, the other one to turn the LED off. So in those cases you would, when you press this button, for example, that would send a number 1 through the serial port to the Arduino and turn the LED on, and this one would send a 0 and turn it off. And this particular one here would send number 2, and it would come back with a number which we convert in the range from 0 to 1024 as being a voltage from 0 to 5 volts, and display that value in the text box here. And then finally you have a button here to exit or terminate the graphical program. Before you actually start controlling the Arduino, one of the major things is to know which port to use to talk to the Arduino itself. So when the program starts, it basically gives you a list of COM ports that are available in this list box here, and you have to select that first as the correct COM port that you're going to use for the Arduino. For example, if it's a 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, you select that one, then press the select button there, and that actuates the COM port in the Visual Basic program to talk to the Arduino via that port. Otherwise it's not going to communicate to it. So that's the major part of the front panel of this form. And to change all the parameters and everything else, you go to the properties of each one of the like buttons or whatever. You can change the naming, the colors, whatever the size. It's up to you how you do that. I'll be providing the project files and whatever, so you should be able to go through all that yourself, but I'll be also explaining for example the next section that tells you a bit about the code, so you can modify it to make it a bit more useful for your own use. So let's look at the actual code for this. This is the underlying code for the buttons and the rest of the front panel that you see there. So actually I might detach this one now. Okay, I'm sorry about the break there, but I basically detached the front panel so you'll be able to see the layout of the front panel or the form, and here's the code for most of the operation there. So I'll just move that to the side there. So the actual code starts with imports of various libraries, like for the input and output for the ports and multiple threading. And one of the first things you have to declare or set up is like having a serial port 1, which we use as a name for the serial port that we're going to communicate as part of the serial ports collection of objects within Visual Basic. So when the actual program starts, the form loads up, and in that loading, what we have to do is basically disable all the other buttons that we're not going to use, other than for example the exit button and the select COM port button, because we haven't selected the COM port as yet. So you should really have these 3 buttons and this text box sort of disabled or not working, because these other 2 buttons should be able to work while the program's running. So the next subroutine there is get serial port names, which is, you'll see it later on. So that basically gets all the available COM ports and lists it in this list box here. And then this next part here basically selects the top selection of that list as being active. If it's not the correct one, you should know the actual COM port for your Arduino. Select that particular one that you need to use, and then press the select COM port button. The next one along is the button number 1, which is to do with the LED on activity, and basically that one is to write number 1 to the serial port, and in the process after that it disables the LED on button and enables the LED off button, because this one's already had the action, and pressing it again won't make that much difference because it's already on. And in a similar way for the LED off button, it will send a 0 and do the reverse, which is turn that off and put that one on. Then if we go to the next button, which is to do with the reading of the analog input A0 port, that sends a number 2 and then reads the serial port line that comes through the serial port, and then that value basically gets converted to the voltage range, which is basically the value that it reads in, multiplies it by 5 and divides it by 1024, and then that particular number gets displayed in this A0 text box here. And if we keep going along, I'll just get back the the front panel there. The next button along is the setup of or select the COM port button. So in there it takes the value of whatever's in the list box here, or the highlighted value. Once you press it, it uses that COM port name as the actual COM port that it's going to communicate through. And then once it's got that, it uses the value for that COM port to set up all the other parameters like the serial port, baud rate, number of bits and parities, and so on and so on. And then finally it also enables the LED on and read A0 buttons on, as you can see there. So we're just missing a section, missing a section here, which is to do with the getting the serial port names subroutine, and that's just basically this command here, which is looking through all the serial port names that it provides through the applications or the Visual Basic program, and then lists them or adds them in the list box there. Okay, what I'll show you now is the section of actually running the application. So to do that, I'll just press start, and that will compile the code there, and it should produce the front panel that we're going to use. And I'll put it up front here, and I'll also show you the image of the camera, so you'll be able to see that going at the same time. So as you can see, the form pops up, and the COM3 is the one that's used for the Arduino that I'm using. It might be different for what you're going to use. So you basically make sure, if you've got multiple COM ports there, select the one that's correct for the Arduino. Then once you've done that, you just go select COM port, and this acknowledges what port you selected and just say OK. So if that's selected and correct, then pressing, as you can see, LED on is on, and so is this read. So we can either set the LED on or read the A0, but we can't turn it off because it's already off on the actual board. So if I press that, it should turn it on. As you can see, it's come on the actual board there, and now that's disabled. And if I press this, that should turn it off, and it gives me the ability to turn it back on, and so on. And now I'll press the read A0, and that should give me a value of the actual pot that's connected between 0 and 5 volts, and the middle of the pot there is connected to the A0 connection on the board. So if I press that, and it's converted to voltage in this case, which is 1.62 volts. So if I use a like a screwdriver to put this like middle of the way, that should give me about 2.5 or so volts. So if I read it again, there it is, 2.76 volts.